Let's go over what we did yesterday and then finish up the parak. Yesterday we learned on page 20a we were learning about the mats, different types of mats. We had machzeles of shifa, gemi, and then we also had machzeles of kanim and chilas. These are different types of mats. The first types were called rush, from the rush family, like bulrush and other types of, I guess, like some type of uh, bush or something like that they make a mat out of. And we mentioned for that, the Brisa said that the gedolah, the large ones, you're masachech with, the small ones you are an ein masachin ba, can't use for schach because they use them for lying down on, and that makes it susceptible to impurity. And then it mentioned the reed mats, and the reed mats was something we saw in our Mishnah. And the reed mats, we had this discussion if it was the Brisa spoke about the two types, if they're braided or they're just woven. Another way of differentiating the two cases was if it's a very large weave or it's a very thin weave, or it's a more of a thin weave. But basically, the thin weave is a topic of an argument, because it's more comfortable to lie on. These are possibly someone would lie on them and therefore they would be susceptible to impurity. So the rabbis held you can't use them for schach. And however, Rabbi Yishmael said the name of Rabbi Yossi, his father, the name of his father, and Rabbi Dois as well said like that you can use reed mats, even the small reed mat, even though it's woven, you could still use it for schach. Now, of course, we have to realize that statement is the case of stama, the case where it's unclear what it's meant for. If it was meant clearly for lying on, and you made it that way, and everyone uses it that way, that's another story. We're dealing with a case where it's it's either some people use it for this, some people use it for that. There's no specific custom. You didn't have anything clear in mind, and there you have a discussion. Is it good? Can you use it for schach or not? And you have the rabbis say you can, and Reb Doisa, Reb Yossi, they say you can. Again, it's the case of stama, the case where it's undesignated. If it was designated for lying on, then it's a little hard to permit it. It's very hard to permit it, actually. So that was the brisa, and then we said that we had a Mishnah in Idias. Really, I guess we started with that yesterday. The Mishnah in Idias says that all mats or chaytzoles, use the word chaytzoles, which could mean mats or it could mean bags that like a leather bag that the shepherds would use. So if it means mats, we're going to have to deal with fitting that into the laws that we are learning. Because what does it say there? It says that these mats are all tameh. They're all susceptible to impurity. Different opinions as to what level of impurity. Reb Doisa says they're subject to the impurity of tameh mace. They're subject to the impurity if they touch a dead body. And the rabbis say they're subject to the impurity of medras, which means that people lie on. So all mats, he uses the word all mats are susceptible to impurity. Reb Doisa says what type of impurity? The impurity of if it touches a dead body. The rabbis say impurity of a medras, people lie on it. Okay, but whatever it is, they're all tameh. So how can you, the Gemara is going to ask this question, how can that fit with our halacha about mats that we had a whole for the last 2 weeks we've been talking about these mats, using them for schach, and here we have a statement where it says they're all susceptible to impurity. So how is that going to work? And The Gemara answers that question um, uh, by saying that there are mats that have a rim and there's mats that don't have a rim. And we're talking about all mats that have rims, they are susceptible to impurity. If it doesn't have a rim, that's another story. But the mats that have a rim, they're used basically for some type of, they would put stuff in it, and it has a rim. So it was a vessel. So therefore, there's reason to say that it's impure no matter what, according to all opinions, and therefore the Mishnah in Idias is not a contradiction to our whole discussion because that's talking about mats that have rims. Okay. In the meantime, let's try to understand what that Mishnah says. The Mishnah says all of these chaytzalos, and again, there was a discussion what chaytzalos are. One opinion, Reish Lakish, says it means mats. The other opinion is it means these bags that the shepherds use, and it seems like they would also, I guess when they got tired, they would lie down on this bag. It's almost like when when you use you have your coat and you just like have not you're let's say on a plane or something, you just lie down and you use your coat as your pillow. They would use their bag as like their pillow. They would lie on it, or they would whatever it was. They would somehow it would come in handy every so often. So the rabbis felt that that's called medrash. They would use it. When they traveled, they would lie on this. So therefore, this bag was considered medrash. It was something they lied on. They put their weight on, and Reb Daisa didn't feel that that's enough of a reason to make it into a medrash. It's not tamei medrash. It's not called something that you lie on just because once in a while. But anyway, the fact is that it either means bags, the bags of the shepherd, or it means mats. And however you learn it, there's an argument, Reb Daisa and the rabbis. Now, Reb Daisa says it's tamei mace. It's subject to the impurity of a corpse touching a corpse and getting tamei. Now, what about the other types of tumah? We know that there's other impurities, like for example, there's the shmoina shrotzim. There's the 8 creatures that are impure when they die, and something these animals. There's also tumas nevela, and what about these type of tumas? When an animal dies and you touch it, it's tamei, it's impure. So would these be tamei for those when they touch these the carcass of an animal, or they touch one of the shmoina shrotzim, these creatures, including a mouse is one of them, other types of creatures. There are 8 of them that talks about. So there are also other types of impurity, not just the corpse. So why does Reb Daisa mention their matame tamei mace? I understand Reb Daisa argues on the rabbis, and he says this is not used as a chair, it's not used as a pillow, it's not used as a bed. This is used as this is tamei mace. It's not tamei medrash. Okay, that I understand. But why does he say it's tamei mace and not just tamei? Why does he say tamei mace? He could have said it's tamei sheretz, or it's just tamei. It's a tamei from a nevela. Why does he use that term tamei mace? So Rashi explains that the reason why he says that is because tamei mace is emphasizing even more that it's subject to a very strong impurity, but not medrash. In other words, he's comparing it to the rabbi's statement of medrash. Medrash could be an av hatumah. It could become what we call a father of tumah. And we said some special, unique laws about medrash hazav, when the zav or zava, nida, yoledas, when they sit on something, that item becomes just as tamei as they are, just as impure as they are, and it carries with it. It's called a father of impurity. It's not called a recipient of impurity. A recipient of impurity would be that could only it goes down a level. This is called a recipient of impurity. uh, when something else, when it touches nevela, when it touches, but a medris is called the avatum. Now, other item, what other impurity makes something else an avatum, a father of tuma, that is not called a recipient of tuma? It's called the source. Avatum means like the source of impurity. Only a corpse. So he's comparing it to the rabbis say it's medris. You have an avatuma. So Reb Daisa argues, says the only source of tuma that it could reach is a tummy mace. Of course, it could also be the other types of impurity. He's not minimizing. He's not saying it doesn't apply. The other types of impurity don't apply. They do apply. But he mentions the term tummy mace because he's saying, you rabbis say medris, it could be an avatuma. I say it can't be that type of avatuma, but there is an avatuma. There is a source of impurity that it could become. And that would be the tummy mace. When it touches a dead body, it becomes a source of impurity. And then everything else that it touches, that chitzolos, whether it's a mat or whether it's a bag, if that touches something else bangs into it, that other thing will become a recipient of impurity. And it keeps going down a level. It becomes the first level recipient. And if that item touches another item, it becomes a second level recipient. And there are scenarios where you could have up to 4 levels of recipients of impurity, depending on if it's truma, if it's that type of level of holiness. Truma is a certain portion given to the kohen, or if it's kudshim, sacrificial items, those items can go up to the 4th level of impurity. Truma can go up to the 3rd level of impurity, and other regular mundane things go up to the 2nd level of impurity. It's different degrees of impurity. One level creates the next level, and that level creates the 3rd level, and then 4th level. And so those are the laws of impurity. And again, I don't like to talk too much about impurity. It's a subject that people tend to shut down, and they don't find interesting. But just on a very simple level, one of the laws of Sukkah is very important to know, is that anything that is subject to impurity, which means anything that's a vessel, can't be used as chach. Anything that's a utensil that's used as a vessel would not be, even though it's wood, it grows from the ground, it's a branch, a type of branch. But if it's used as a vessel, that would make it invalid for schach. So that just explains. So we have that Mishnah in Idias. This is a special Mishnah that tells us chaytzolos are tameh. Chaytzolos. The Gemara asks, so what is chaytzolos? Now, Reb Daisa said that chaytzolos are tameh mace. The rabbis say it's medris. And the Gemara, of course, explains it doesn't mean only medris. The Gemara says it's not only tameh because people lie on it, and that's the only type of impurity it can get. No, it means anything that's tameh medris is tameh all the other types of tumas. Is also impure from all the other things. So the Gemara explains it means even medris. Okay, so that's how the Gemara explains that Mishnah. And then it says, what is chaytzolos? And then you have the 2 opinions that I shared with you before. That one opinion, chaytzolos, means these type of leather bags that are used by the shepherds, and they put them, seems like they lie on them, and as well as, of course, using them as bags. But in addition to that, they lie on it. So therefore, the rabbis will say that it's tamei medris. You lie on it. The Reb Daisa would say it's not tamei medris because they don't always lie on it. It's not designated maybe enough to lie on. But at least it's tamei. It's a bag. It's tamei mace. It could be tamei for all the other types of impurity, including tamei mace, where it could be an avhatum. It could be a source of impurity. Okay, so that's one explanation. And that was Rav Abdimi Bar Hamduri and Rav Abba. They said it means these type of bags. Reish Lakish, or another way of saying his name is Reb Shimon ben Lakish. He says it means that it's machatzolos. Machatzolos is what we've been talking about in our Gemara. So these mats. Chaytzolos is machzolos. It's the same word, basically. It's the same root word. Machzolos and chaytzolos. It means these mats. And then, of course, the Gemara is going to have to deal with that question that I mentioned. Before the Gemara deals with that question, it does talk about Reb Shimon ben Lakish mentions this interesting statement. And he says that he holds it means mats. And he goes according to his reason, and he goes through a little history here. And what does he say? And this is on the bottom of 20a. He says that he mentions Reb Chia and his kids, and that I should be an atonement. All of my pain and suffering should be an atonement for Reb Chia and his kids, which is a very honorable statement to say. Most people, as I mentioned yesterday, it's brought in Shulchan Aruch about saying it for one's parent after they pass away, a person says, Hareini kaparas mishkavoi. That's what a person traditionally says the first year after their parent passes away. They would say, my pain, my suffering should be a atonement for one's parent. And Reish Lakish said this about Reb Chia and his kids, and he quotes them, and he says that he says more than just about them. He says Torah was forgotten, and when it was forgotten from the Yidden, Ezra went and reestablished it, and then it was forgotten again, where the Bnei Beseira forgot it, and Hillel came and reestablished it, and then it was forgotten again, and Reb Chia and his kids came and reestablished it. And one way of understanding what he's saying here is bringing this historical thing, which is nice to know. Ezra somehow reestablished Torah, and Hillel Habavli reestablished Torah, and the Babylon was a place of great learning, and Hillel, who came from there, he brought it back to Israel. When it came back to Eretz Yisrael, he reestablished Torah because they had questions, and he came up with he told them the answer. And then we had Reb Chia and his kids. They also came and they were reestablished Torah. Now, one way of learning this Gemara is that Reb Chia and his kids came and explained what Chaytzalos are. So he says, I'm quoting Reb Chia and his kids, that they helped us because we didn't know what the Mishnah means. Chaytzalos in Idias, what does it mean that it's Tamei Meis or it's Tamei Medris? I didn't know what it means. But guess what? Reb Chia and his kids, they reestablished Torah because we didn't know what it meant. And Reb Chia and his kids told us that they explained that they don't argue about the Usha type of mats, and they don't argue about the Tiberius type of mats, but what they do argue about is mats of all other places. So Reb Chia and his kids, they helped us know what type of mats we're talking about. And so he calls that he reestablished Torah. That's one way of learning. Or he just mentions them, and they mention this law, but he's really referring to another Gemara. And he's really referring to another Gemara that Reb Chia and his kids reestablished Torah. How did he reestablish Torah? So there's a Gemara in Bava Metzia that tells us that Reb Chia reestablished Torah because he went to places, to villages where the Torah was being forgotten. And what he would do is he would plant flax, and he would then make nets out of the flax. And then he would catch or trap a deer. And then he would slaughter it, give the meat to the poor. And he would then write on the parchment the Torah. And he would write the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, the 5 books of Moses, and he would write the 6 books of the Mishnah. And he would teach 5 kids the 5 books of Moses, meaning he would teach one kid Bereshis, another kid Shemais, another kid Vayikra, and Bamidbar and Devarim, and then he wrote the 6 portions of the 6 divisions of the Mishnah. This kid, another 6 kids. He taught this kid Zroim, all the laws of seeds. He taught another kid Mayed, all the laws of the holidays. And he went and he taught these kids. And then he said, now you kids, until I come back, I want you to share your learning with all the other kids. So these kids went and spread their learning. They became, Reb Chia and his kids, they did this, and they reestablished Torah to all of these villages where there wasn't Torah, and reestablished Torah to the world. So ultimately, he said that Reb Chia was a great person, that he reestablished Torah. So because of that, he mentions Harini Kaparas Reb Chia Uvanav. He felt a special respect for Reb Chia and his kids, and he said that. And then he mentions the law about machzelis, that Reb Chia and his kids mentioned that what is this meaning of this chaytzalos, and the argument between Rab Doisa and the rabbis. He says what it means is that chaytzalos is from a certain places, but not all places. Why? Because there are some chaytzalos, which means machzalos, which Reb Chia and his kids and Reb Doisa, they translate it to mean mats, that certain mats don't fall into these rules. The rabbis don't argue with Reb Daisa about them. Where is that? Usha and Tveria. Why? Because in Usha, all the mats are meant to lie on. That's the way it is in that city. Usha, there was nothing to talk about. The mats there are you lie. You make your own mat. Okay, fine. You could use it for schach. You make your own mat. Fine. But you had in mind specifically it's for this. That would fall into another. Actually, I'm not sure if everyone would agree with that because it could be it depends on the minhag hamakom. But if you follow the one way of learning, which is it depends on your intent, then if you have in mind you make your own mat, no problem. You make your own mat, it's kosher. But any general mat is going to be invalid in Usha. Tmeos. Even according to Reb Daisa, there's no leniencies. Everyone holds it's Tameh. We're not even talking about Sukkah. We're talking about Tumah, impurity. Everyone agrees that they're meant to lie on the Tumas Medras. They're all Tameh Medras. They're meant for Miyuchad for Yeshiva. They're all going to be lie. You lie on them. They're Tameh Medras. Now Tveria mats, everyone agrees they're tar. You know what? In Tveria, no one lies on mats. Why? I don't know exactly. Rashi says they're hard. In Tveria, maybe the material there was harder. I don't know, from the heat. Maybe Tveria is a very hot place, but I don't know exactly why. Maybe, but for whatever reason, in Tveria they were all made hard. They didn't have machinery to make it softer. I don't know, whatever it is. Somehow they're hard in Tveria, and no one lies on them. And so therefore, they're makabel tumah mace. They're susceptible to impurity of a dead body, and of course of all the other impurities, but not medras, because no one lied. They're not useful. What is the argument? Reb Daisa and the rabbis, shar makaymes, other places. That's where they argue. They argue about other places. That do people lie on these mats, or do they not lie on them? So there you have a debate between Reb Daisa and the rabbis, and Rashi uses the word Ein roiv b'nei adam regilan liyachdim. Majority of people aren't usual to designate them for this. So it sounds from Rashi like definitely. I mean, and the Gemara really says mikri v'yasif. There definitely people do sometimes lie on this. But the question is, do we go by what level of majority do we go by? And the reason why you would say it's not considered medras is because the majority of people are not usual to designate it for this, which means that the other rabbi holds that even if you don't have the majority of people designating it for this, but many do, and it's often designated for this, and that's good enough. So it's a question as to what extent, how do we measure that statistics? And Reb Daisa said, no, it's not considered, we don't look at it as if it's meant to lie on. And the rabbis say, no, we do consider it as if it's meant to lie on. And that's why there's an argument if it's tamei mace or tamei medras. Tamei mace means it's tamei all the tumas except medras. And tamei medras means it's tamei all the tumas even medras. That's the argument. And basically, that's the statement that we have from Reb Chia. And what we see from his statement is that he used the term machzolis. So he translated chaytzolis to be machzolis, and the other rabbi translated chaytzolis to mean the bags. Okay, and then we get into the contradiction to our discussion, which is if they're always tamei, it really is Reb Daisa himself doesn't fit. And that's really what the Gemara asks. How could Reb Daisa say here that they're tamei mace if before he said you could use it for your sukkah? He said in a previous brisa, he said you're allowed to use machzolos that are made from konim. You're allowed to use it for your sukkah, mesakhin ba, gedula, aruga, however it is. It's small, it's weaved. He basically said, I agree with Reb Yossi. And this was the question that we had. And then on this, the Gemara answers that it depends if it has a lip, if it has some type of a wall around it. It seems like they would make a mat with a wall around it. I'm not so familiar with seeing such a thing. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with a mat that they would make a wall around, but that is, seems like in those days they would. I guess they would want to use it maybe once, maybe they sometimes would use it not with the wall, sometimes with the wall, whatever it is. So the point is that it was considered a receptacle that was used for that purpose, and therefore it's susceptible to impurity as a receptacle. It might also be used to lie on, but it was used for that, and therefore Reb Doisa says it's always tamei mace. It's always tamei mace, which means it's tamei all types of impurity, just not to medras, not used to lie on. But it's tamei, it's impure of all these types of impurity because it's a utensil. Well, how is it a utensil? It has a rim around it, so it could be used for could be used for some type of putting fruit in and use some type of container, so to speak. Okay, so that was the answer that makes Reb Doisa not be a contradiction on himself. Okay, we're going to start here with Mesve. In here, what the Gemara is going to do, it's going to have two versions of trying to figure out how to understand chaytzalos, that they are tamei, that they are impure. How do you understand chaytzalos, these either bags or mattress or a mat? Why is it impure if it's made from one type of material or another type of material? And some of the materials are woven very tightly, and some of them are woven very loosely, like a net that has a lot of big holes. And so the Gemara is going to try to figure out what could it be used for, and would we be able to prove that maybe what chaytzalis means from the fact that there are different materials? There's another brisa that talks about chaytzalis, and it talks about different types of items that were different types of materials that it was made from. So maybe there we could figure out if it means a mat or if it means a bag. And it's going to have two versions. One version we try to prove it means a mat. The other version we try to prove it means a bag. And ultimately, the Gemara answers that it could mean both. We don't know, and that's why there's an argument in the Gemara what chaytzalis really means. But here, the Gemara is going to try to prove one way, and then the Gemara is going to have a different version where it tries to prove the other way, and it doesn't prove anything in the end. It basically keeps it status quo, and that's the end. That's basically how our Gemara is going to end with this. Or it has one tiny little thing right afterwards about using for schach, but that's basically this is the next piece. Okay, so Amar Mar. Let me tell you where we are in the Gemara. Amar Mar, Master said. Or Mesve, actually. Let's start with Mesve. I think that's better. Mesve. Mesve is 7 or 8 lines from the top of the page. Mesve, we're on page 20b. 20b, Mesve, 8 lines from the top of the page. Mesve, the student scholars asked a contradiction, or they tried to prove about what chaytzalos are, and ultimately asked the question against the other opinion about what chaytzalos means. So what did they prove from a brisa? So they bring a brisa, Mesve, the Bnei Yeshiva, the student scholars ask this contradiction. Chaytzalos shel sham v'shel gemi. Sham, Rashi tells us, means shifa, is what we had before. It's the rush family, a bulrush or other rush, but from that family of vegetation, of grass, of some type of growths. So it's the rush family mat. Vishal sak, or you have a mat that's made out of sak. Sak is the hair of it's goat hair, or vishal sfira, or it's made out of horse hair. So you have different types of mats, either mats from the rush family, mats from goat hair, or mats from horse hair. All these type of, and I shouldn't use the word mat, excuse me, chaytzalos. It either means mat or it means bag. We don't know yet what it means. So I'm not going to translate. I'll call it chaytzalos. So chaytzolis made from the rush family or made from these hairs of animals, mitame tamei mace. It's tamei mace, divrei Reb Doisa. These are the words of Reb Doisa. Reb Doisa says it's not medrus, tamei mace. It's susceptible to impurity because it's whatever it's used for something, which we'll soon see. But these chaytzolos are not used to lie on, so it's not tummy medrus. It's tummy all the other types of impurity, including tummy mace. It means it could be even an avhatum. It could be a source of impurity. The rabbis say af medrus. It's even tummy medrus, which means that it even is used to lie on, and therefore it's tummy medrus. If a zav lies on it, it would actually be as tummy as the zav himself is. It's a source of tumah. And it's tummy medrus, even if he doesn't touch it, even he just puts his weight on it with something separating it. Tummy medrus. This is with the rabbi's opinion about these chaytzolos. So now the Gemara gets to business. Bishloima, it is good, Laman Damar Marzuvli. If you say, like Rav Avdimi translated, that chaytzolos means these bags, these shepherd bags that are seemingly, initially we translated that they often used made out of leather, but here seems like it's not exactly leather. They're bags that are used for the shepherds, but they're here we're talking about chitzolis that are made out of other material. They're made out of shifa, gemi, and sak. Shifa, gemi, sak, and sfira. So they're made out of these type of bags, according to that opinion, that they're made out of these bags. So why are they tummy? If someone lies on it, I could understand that they're tummy. They're tummy because someone lies. They're used to lie on. They're designated to lie on. Fine. But what about for a bag? Does it make sense that a bag made out of a net would be tummy? You will use it for anything? That's what the Gemara is going to ask here. So the Gemara says, it's good if you say it means bags. Shel sham v'shel gemi, if it's made out of sham and gemi, which is these rush family bag, so it has big holes because when they weave the rushes to the into a bag, the way it's woven is there's big holes. It's like a net. So it says, yeah, it actually could be used for a bag. It's used to make a big container of fruit, which means they sort of can, big fruits won't fall out of these holes. So it could be used for to make a container, a basket of fruit, and that's what this bag is used for. It makes it into like a basket. It makes it into like a container, a package of fruit. V'shel sak, v'shel sfira. Now, what about the sak and sfira? What would that bag be used for? That's very simple. That's considered a vessel because it's chazi. It's chazu legulki. It's good for vitzani. It's good for these pouches and other types of and some other type of a basket. So it's usable. The small, of course, you can put even small things in. You can put even beans and other small fruits in because this is a much tighter weave. Sak and sfira. I guess for some reason wheat. For some reason, the hair of goats and the hair of horses can make a much tighter type of a weave than the bulrush or the rush family weave. So this is understandable. Actually, bags fits. We can understand why it's tummy. And we're not talking about tummy because someone lies on it. That we for sure understand. Someone lies on it, that's an automatic. But how could it be used as a bag? Does that make sense? Yeah, it makes sense. It could either be used for big fruits or small fruits. It could be used to, it has big holes, no problem. Has small holes, for sure it's good. Okay, so that makes sense. But what about if you want to translate chaytzolis to mean mats? If you want to say it means mats, so if it's a mat, I understand if it's made out of sak and sfira, these hairs of the the hair of the goats and the hair of the horses. So that weave is actually a very tight weave, and it's chazu leprasi. It's good for a shade, for a like a machitza. That's I understand. It's good v'nafasa, and it's good to sift the flour because it's a pretty tight weave, but the flour can fall through it, and it'll keep the pebbles from so it's a good sifter. It's a good sifter for the flour. So it's a tighter weave. It's good for that. It's also good for prusy. It's good for a shade, like a window shade or other shades. Why? Because it blocks out the sun. It's a tight weave. It's going to be good. It's gonna protect you. It's going to be a good shade. Ella, but shel sham shel gemi. But what about if you're translating chaytzolos to mean mats, and now you're going to make a mat out of this net? So sham and gemi are made out of the rush family material. So it has big holes. So the Gemara asks, "Lamai chazi, what are you going to use a mat?" So a mat that's a tighter mat, I could understand. It has a lot of uses. A mat that's big holes, what could it be used for? How could you translate to mean a mat? So it's in a certain sense what the Gemara is trying to say is it must mean a bag. The other opinion must be right. The Gemara says no. It's fit to cover the barrel of the beer. And this is what we spoke about yesterday, that the barrel of the beer is, this would be the cover for the barrel. And Rashi at least learns that would be something that was considered a vessel. It's tameh. And even though Tosfos argues on this and says, how could a cover be tameh? We don't find that a cover is tameh. We have sources that it's covers are not tameh, they're tahor, they're pure, they don't become impure, and has to be fit to receive something. And so Tosfos wants to learn it must mean that it's fit for something. So again, you have this mat that has big holes in it, and we want to know what it's usable for. And so the way Rashi learns, it's usable as a cover for the beer vat, for the beer barrel. And we explained that you could answer Rashi that it's because it's always used there as a cover. Even if there's no food there, even if there's no beer, it's a cover that's constantly there, and because of that, it is considered a vessel, a utensil. If it would only be there for the when there's beer inside, then it would be a problem.
You just gave you just gave the answer. The fact that it's being used always as a cover, and you use the term always, so therefore it's not for schach. Therefore, based on previous definition, previous arguments that you've given before, it then is mekabel tuma. It's considered to be mekabel tuma.
I'm not sure what you're referring to. What do you mean? Answer to what question?
What you were saying now was the fact that it's always being used to cover the barrel.
Right.
So it's not for schach.
Right. Right. In other words, this is something that's just used as a cover, maybe for shade. That would be a problem. But if it's used as a cover for a container, part of a container, that's susceptible to impurity. So that would right. In other words, the question that we asked at the end of yesterday's class, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
So that's we said it yesterday.
It's mekabel. It makes sense that it's mekabel tuma.
Right. No, we said that yesterday because we were trying to figure out yesterday. Thank you, Ezra, for bringing this up, because at the end of yesterday's class, we had a little discussion about something that's used as a cover. It seems here, according to Rashi, at least, it's susceptible to tuma, and we said then what about schach? Schach itself, it's used for covering. If it's used for covering, that also would be considered like a cover. So yesterday we said that possibly you could say that that this is the difference, that or it seems that this is the difference, that that the way that's regular cover is not tameh, but a cover that's meant to be part of the vessel, it's always there. So then it has a law of a vessel. It's considered like a vessel. It's impure, and that's why this type of cover would be considered susceptible to impurity, and it has nothing to do with stach. Again, our Gemara, this Gemara now is not really dealing with stach, but just we were trying to connect it and question, dealing with the issue of what makes schach not susceptible to impurity. Why the fact that it's a cover. So that this is what we said yesterday, and thank you, Ezra, for bringing it up. Yeah. And we concluded that yesterday. That was the way we ended the discussion. But that's, yeah. So that would be that would seem to be the answer. That this has a law of a vessel. It's considered part of the vessel. So the bottom line is the mat that is used to cover this beer. It seems to be or it's used not to cover beer. It's used to cover the beer vat. It's always there. So that is considered part of the vessel. It's susceptible to impurity. So now we've answered the question. Yes.
Okay. So why are we saying a cover is a cover is a cover? Why are we equating a cover to a barrel to a cover to a sukkah? A sukkah is not a vessel. And so therefore you can't compare A to B.
Mm-hmm. So really, the Gemara is not the Gemara is not comparing it here that a cover to a sukkah. We were questioning that. We were asking, but you're right. Maybe you could say that only a cover to a barrel is tummy, and not a cover to a sukkah, not a shade. But it just sounded like anything that covers something, that itself is considered a utensil. That's what it sounded like. In other words, it didn't sound like it has something to do with the barrel. But the way we ended the discussion yesterday was it does have to do it. It's part of the barrel. That's why it's tummy. So in other words, that's sort of what we're answering. That it's because it's a barrel, and so this is a piece of that barrel. It's a cover to the. It's always there. It's always part of the barrel. That's why it seems that's why it's tummy. So again, it's not 100% question. We made this question on our own. This is not the Gemara's question. This is not the Gemara comparing the two things. We came up with this question, and we seem to it seems that this is the answer to that problem of how to deal with it. The reason why it was a problem was it sounded like anything that is usable, like a utensil for something, and maybe a cover to an item, maybe that's called a utensil. And the answer that we said was no, it's not always. In fact, Tosfos proves that it's not so. Rashi, that says that it is considered a utensil, it's based on the fact that it's always there. It's always it's almost like part of the utensil. That's why it seems like that's the meaning of it, that it's like part of because it's always there, it's part of the utensil. Now, why would they use this net over a beer vat? So I'm just guessing that it's probably to stop the big things from falling in. I guess they weren't so worried that small thing. Like, why didn't they use a better cover? Why would they use this for? That is just what's bothering me is why was this something that was used over a beer vat? Why wouldn't they want something that's a better cover? This has big holes. It's just a net. Wouldn't they want to cover it better? Why is this usable for that? Why is it considered and this is more of a practical question. Someone who makes beer. If any of you have ever made beer or understands how it works with these big vats, why would this be sufficient? Do they need ear holes? Is that the reason? So this is it's just covering from big things that fall in, but they do it in air. Maybe they only have it in an area where nothing small could get in. They're only worried about big things.
It obviously doesn't last long.
It doesn't last long.
Yeah, the open beer.
What?
You have to cover it quickly for a little bit, but it doesn't last long. The open beer.
No, this is how they make it. This is for the way they made it. This is not the
right
after this is not after you open a beer that you have to drink it within a certain time.
No,
Otherwise,
the barrel.
you lose
It's like a big barrel of beer, right? And that's the top of the barrel.
So it wasn't necessary to have the expensive cover.
Or
wasn't
maybe
necessary.
They're scooping in. I don't know if they're scooping in from the top. I don't know how they made beer.
Right.
Rabbi?
Yeah, Moshe.
I'm curious about nets that are made out of horsehair and goat hair.
Uh-huh.
Horsehair is non-kosher. A goat hair is. Goat is kosher, a horse isn't. Why would they want
Uh-huh.
to put things in
So first of all, it's not a problem. I wouldn't suggest anyone eat it, but hair is not edible, so it's not an issue of kashrus. But I believe you can get quite a stomach ache from eating a horsehair, but at least smoking a horsehair, I think is quite dangerous. But in any event, we're dealing here with the Sham and Gemi with the Rush family. So it's the cover that we're using for the beer is the other material. It's not the horsehair and the goat hair. All right, but besides that, it's not a problem. I mean, I don't suggest you go eat horsehair, but
Ooh.
okay, now the next Gemara, Ikadami, some say, and this is the other version, which basically asks a question on the other opinion, tries to prove the other opinion wrong. Some say that the question that was asked by the student scholars was the opposite. Let me tell you where we are. Ikadami. There are those that say, there are those that have a different version. It's the last word on the line. It must be about 20 lines from the top of the page. Some say that the question was as follows. It's good if you say that we're referring to machzolos, the mats. That's what chitzolos means. It means a mat. So Shashar Mishal Gemi, the Rush family mat, that is fit to use as a cover for beer, the beer vat. Shelsag Mishal Sphira, now the horse here and the goat hair and the horse hair, that is chazi leprasi v'nafasa. That's good to use. It's a tighter weave. It's good to use for a shade because of the sun. It'll block the sun. V'nafasa, and good to use as a sifter. So that I understand why you would make a mat, why it's considered a vessel and it's considered susceptible to impurity. Again, we're not really talking about Sukkah now. Now we're just continuing this discussion about these items that they're susceptible to impurity. So why are they susceptible to impurity? Because they're a vessel. They're used for something. But if you want to translate chaytzolis to mean that it's referring to a bag, so if it's a bag, it's good if you say that it's a bag made out of the sak and sfira, which are these hairs. It's a bag made out of goat hair and horse hair. So and it's a tight weave. So it's chazal l'gulkivitzani. It's fit to use as some type of pouch, and it's you can make a pouch from it and sack and some type of you put small, you could put small things in. It's a tight weave. It's good to it's usable for things. Ella, but shal gemi. But if you have a bag, if you have a bag made out of the Rush family, so there's a big holes. My cousin, what would you use it for? My answer is it's fit to make from this, from using this bag into a way to make a container for big fruits. So the fruits are not going to fall out, even though you have holes. But the fruits, it's going to hold them in and make yourself a big basket of them. From this bag will be considered like a container for these fruits. Okay, so that's the end of this discussion, that we can understand chaytzolos to either mean a mat or it could either mean a bag. And now comes the last little piece. Tanya, it was taught in a brisa. Amar Rab Chananya says, Kishar Yaraditi Lagoila, when I went down into Bavel, into Babylon, into Golus, and when I went down into Golus, and the Gemara says, Matsasi zakin echad, I found an elder, va'amar li, and he said to me, Mesakhin b'budya, you can use a budya. Budya is a mat for schach. You could use a mat for schach. And you could use a mat for schach. That's what he said. That he told me you could use it. When I went to Rabbi Yeshua, the brother of my father, In other words, Reb Chananya was the nephew, and he says, when I went to Reb Yeshua, my uncle, he agreed to the words of this elder, that you're allowed to use a mat for schach. Of course, we're talking about a mat that's not it's a place where they don't lie on it, and so on. And it's not, it's either a place where they never lie on it, it's like the mats of Tiberia, or you could translate it to mean that it's talking about mats that are not woven, so everyone agrees that you don't do it, or maybe the Gemara's telling us that the psak is like Reb Daisa. That's another way of learning this Gemara. In other words, one way of learning it is it's not clearly telling us who the halacha is like. It's just that he told me about using mats. I could use it. And it's talking about a case where everyone agrees. Another way of understanding this is it's telling us, you know what? The halacha follows Reb Daisa and Reb Yaisi. If you remember, Reb Daisa and Reb Yaisi were the ones that were lenient. That when you have a mat made out of reeds, Reb Daisa, Reb Yaisi said, no problem. Even if it's woven, it's small, it's woven. Reb Daisa, that's the halacha, and that's what Reb Chananya is coming to tell us. That, you know what, I went to Goyla, I went to Bavel, and I found this elder who passed in this way, like Reb Daisa and Reb Yaisi, and I went to my uncle, he agreed. And the Gemara says, Rav Chizda, v'hu de les legedanfa. And Rav Chizda qualifies it, and he says, by the way, that's davka, that's specifically if it doesn't have the edge around it, because that was a case where even Reb Daisa agrees that it's going to be susceptible to other impurities, not medrus maybe, but other impurities, and therefore it can't have that edge around it, so it's not considered a receptacle. Now, the Gemara finishes off. Amar Ula Hani Mudyasa Devnei Mechayza. These mats of Bnei Mechayza Il Male Kirshalahen Mesachkin Bahu. If not for their edge that they have a lip on it, you would be able to use them for schach. And Tanya Nami Hachi, we also have a brisa that says, just like Ula said, Mesachkin Babudya, we can use budya. We could use budya for schach. Budya is mats. And yeshla and kir, and if they have an edge, a lip, ein masakin bahu, you cannot use it for schach, because then they would be a vessel and they would be invalid for schach. Hadron Allah Sukkah, may Sukkah come back to us, which means this chapter called Sukkah should return to us. We should review it. It shouldn't be forgotten.